Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you about 4 key steps that you can take when you are deciding to date again after breaking up with a narcissist, after being in a narcissistic relationship. So this is a topic that comes up a lot. We get a lot of requests for this, obviously, really, common topic. And according to some research that was done and presented more recently, the research shows that literally the estimation is about 10% of people are narcissists. 1 in 10 individuals struggles with narcissistic personality disorder. So not even like narcissistic traits or tendencies, but is actually a narcissist. That was like kind of shocking to me when I read that. I was like, wow. But what's really important here to recognize is that that person, first and foremost, is in a state of trauma. And because of that, they're likely to pass that trauma onto other people. And that's what happens, unfortunately, when we are in, an unhealed space is, we end up passing, like hurt people essentially. And so, while I very, very much believe that, human beings go through trauma and this is part of like what breaks them down and sort of creates challenges and painful dynamics in life, it is so important to make sure that you've got good boundaries and that you're not returning to relationships that are potentially going to harm you in some form. And, this would likely be one of those relationships. So I just want to really stress how important it is that if you do truly think you're with someone, not somebody with like, who can be a little bit self-oriented sometimes or a little bit selfish or things like that. I'm not talking about any of that. I mean, like actual like narcissistic personality disorder. And there's some videos on this channel that talk about what those traits and characteristics are according to the DSM and what to sort of be aware of. But what we are here to talk about today is dating after a narcissistic relationship. And it can be really difficult for people who were victims of narcissistic abuse to, put themselves back out there. And there's some really important things that are absolute necessities, in my opinion, to keep in mind in order to prepare yourself for healthy dating going forward. The very first thing is that unfortunately, and again, like I'm not sitting here, beating up on narcissists either. Like they are people who went through a substantial amount of trauma themselves, but unfortunately they leave imprints on other people. And these imprints are usually things like broken trust, violated boundaries. And I'm talking about like imprints at the subconscious level, feelings of being controlled, not being able to make your own decisions, being shut out, extreme love bombing followed by withdrawing, a lot of unpredictability, and even at times in more extreme cases, the lack of safety. And so, when we look at these major imprints, because imprints are left in a way that affect the subconscious mind, and so they're likely to stay with us, they become belief patterns we essentially carry and assume that other people will behave similar to this. Or we end up behaving this way in the relationship to ourselves once a traumatic imprint is left. So let's just say, for example, if trust is really broken in a relationship that I'm in, then I may go on to be like, oh, well, be hurt by that, pained by that, and then break trust in my own relationship to myself. If somebody's constantly violating my own boundaries, I learn, okay, it's safer to be boundaryless in order to maintain that relationship. Now, a lot of these patterns we originally pick up in childhood. If we're exposed to different potential parenting dynamics, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with narcissism, but of course it can. And then whenever we have these imprints, this is also part of what is likely to draw us towards more narcissistic people in our adult lives, because we have a subconscious comfort zone that feels like, oh, this is familiar. And so we're sometimes more willing to put up with things that are really unhealthy and painful because our subconscious doesn't really know the difference if this is related to our past or our history. So anyways, with all of that being said, the very first step here is to find the imprints that were left and to heal these things in the relationship to yourself. So when we look at, for example, broken trust, how we can work on healing trust in the relationship to ourselves would be being more congruent, protecting ourselves, speaking up, sharing our opinions, setting our boundaries, these sorts of things. This is how we like establish trust in ourselves, essentially. Being controlled. Okay, well, then we have to literally look for freedom in our lives, support ourselves in freedom, in autonomy in our lives, and being able to make our own choices and decisions, these sorts of things. So what I want you to do is, like some of those imprints that I mentioned, write out what was left there for you and write some strategies for how you can support yourself in moving beyond these imprints, and really, reprogramming them by taking repetitive daily action to create a different set of neural pathways, fire and wire new patterns regularly, especially as they elicit emotional responses, and let these old ways of being and neural pathways essentially atrophy over time or kind of die out. So that's one of the first really important things. And that sort of brings me to number 2, which is then to reprogram these things in the relationship to yourself using those strategies or new habits. And then number 3 becomes find all the unmet needs that were there in the relationship. Like, did you need support? Did you need consistency? Did you need predictability? Did you need someone to encourage you, to be kind to you, to be respectful to you? Write out all those things and then think of how you can pour in the relationship to yourself to give those things. And what you're essentially doing, so that's sort of step 3 and 4, find your unmet needs, meet them in the relationship to yourself. And what you're essentially doing here is you are finding all of the weeds that were planted, right? All of the painful seeds that were planted by somebody else because of their own trauma, likely from their own traumatic childhood or upbringing, or unresolved wounds and stuff. And what you're doing is you're saying, okay, it stops here. And you're finding all those weeds, what they are, and you're plucking them out at their roots by actually reprogramming the deep imprints that may have been left by that situation. And as you rebuild trust in the relationship to yourself, self-protection through being masterful at setting your own boundaries, being kind and not so critical in the relationship to yourself, being encouraging, keeping yourself safe in the world, creating structure and predictability, honoring your own self-empowerment and, freedom. Like as you do all these different things, autonomy, as you nurture these things in the relationship to yourself, what you are doing is you're seriously like planting new sort of seeds where those old ones were and watering those and nourishing those. So you can create like a thriving garden from all of that instead of, having sort of the landscape of your subconscious mind be riddled with pain points that were left by others that are an injustice to have to continuously carry around over and over again, because you were exposed to that circumstance to begin with. So it's really important after we go through trauma or traumatic events, to really do the work on like reparenting ourselves, showing up in the relationship to ourselves. And if you want to do a much deeper dive into some of this, we have a course for free you can check out for 7 days. And it's literally the subconscious reprogramming course all about reparenting. And another really powerful one is the post-traumatic growth course. And it's all about studies of post-traumatic growth, what's likely to create growth on the other side of going through traumatic or challenging experiences. It gives you some really deep, powerful steps to reprogram any imprints that were left at the subconscious level. And there's a very intensive like workbook and exercises that are there to help guide you through the process. So anyways, hopefully this makes a lot of sense. It's a really important topic and it applies to all kinds of different traumatic experiences we might go through, but it is really important to like pluck out the weeds that were left, because it's an injustice that we usually acquired them to begin with. And it's even a greater injustice if we continue to carry those things with us over and over again. So hopefully this makes sense. Thank you so much for watching. Again, you can click the link in the description box below if you want to do a deeper dive into some supportive content. And please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in tomorrow's video.